In this video, I'll be attempting to forge a hatchet or tomahawk from a coil spring. First step is to straighten out the coil spring so it's not round anymore, because it's very hard to get into a nice billet when it's round. Once it's mostly straight, I can start trying to forge it out into a nice billet to make it easier to forge the hatchet shape. As you can see, we're starting to get a little square. What I'm looking for, though, is a little more of a rectangle. My plan was to get a nice long billet so that I could fold it over and shape the hatchet. The only problem was I was going to have to forge weld it, which I'm not very good at forge welding. I've tried to make Damascus before, but something about it, my welds just never stick. I'm gonna keep trying though, and that's part of why I'm making this hatchet, so I can kind of master the forge weld before I try to make Damascus again in a later video. After the first day, I had completely finished the billet to where I could start shaping the hatchet, and things were looking pretty good progress-wise. On the second day, my main goal was to flesh out the hatchet shape and maybe forge weld the two sides if I could. The first step was to make sure that the middle of the billet would be wide enough for the hatchet, because if it's too thin, it would not be able to hold the hatchet onto the handle. Once I'd gotten the middle of the billet wide enough, it was time to start forging out one of the edges into the hatchet shape. The trick would be being able to copy it on the other side so they would fold over as nicely as possible. Here I'm trying to bend the hatchet a little bit so it has a more desirable shape. I was starting to get close to the shape I wanted. One problem was that the steel was getting fairly thin. My one hope was that once I had forge welded the two sides together, it would be thick enough though. But for a hatchet, you don't always need it to be that thick, so I wasn't too worried. As I finished up shaping both sides, I was careful to wire brush it a lot because that's the best way to get a nice clean weld, is to make sure the steel is fairly clean, which, while it's not perfect, a wire brush does a decent job. I was pretty much ready to fold the hatchet over, so I got ready to forge weld it. Ready to forge weld it, so I started pouring cocaine all over it so that the forge weld would stick better. My first attempt at forge welding it did not go according to plan. It was pretty obvious that it wasn't welding, but it was kind of expected because the two sides were not completely touching each other when I started forge welding it, so it was very tricky to get some purchase. After I reviewed the footage, I realized I was kind of swinging my hammer wrong. Rather than going straight down like that, I was kind of swinging it to the side a little too much, and so I tried to fix that in the next attempt. And while editing this video, I kind of realized that the exploding that you're seeing on screen with all the sparks flying, a lot of time that's caused by air pockets, but in my case, I think I poured a little bit too much flux onto the piece, and that might be why it's exploding. I don't actually know. I mean, it looks cool, so I'm not complaining, but it might have been why my weld wasn't working. I think I need to use a little bit less flux. Another problem I was having was I was getting ice on the bottom of my propane tank, which if you forge at all, or use propane for your forge rather, for some reason it happens because of the pressure differential, ice forms at the bottom of the propane tank, but it is kind of annoying because you have to shake up the propane tank to keep the propane from freezing. As you can see, I'm using a super heavy hammer, which might have also been a problem. I don't know how, but it could have been. I'm just thinking of ways that my forge weld could have been not working at this point. The sparks did get so annoying though that I did put on gloves. At this point, the two pieces of steel were starting to stick, and I thought that that meant it would forge welded, but afterwards I learned it had not quite forge welded yet. This tool is for helping to shape the eye of the hatchet so that it fits well on the handle. At this point, I decided to normalize the hatchet so that I could check if the forge welds had stuck with the grinder later. The next day, I started grinding so I could hopefully see that the forge welds had stuck. Grinding revealed that the forge welds had not stuck. You can kind of see in some spots it did stick, which is probably why the two ends were starting to stick together towards the end. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you can not miss out on the next video where I'll try and save this project from becoming, I don't know, a paperweight or just thrown away. Probably just thrown away.